New technology started crashing through the video game world in massive waves during the mid-90s.
Combining three 32-bit RISC processors.
With these exciting new tools, creators wanted to take games to the next level, to make them as close to real life as possible by using real people. Virtual Hydlide is the ultimate example of this future of gaming vision. It's like T&E Soft had a board meeting where someone shot from their seat, slammed their hands against the table and yelled, "Let's fucking go for it. We're gonna make the best game. Let's put in real people as the characters, randomly generate the entire map with each new game for infinite replayability, and use digitized graphics to create every aspect of fantasy ever conceived by the artists of man. Every ounce of liquid will be juiced from the fruits of the future in order to convince the controller-wielding warrior they are manipulating a real meat puppet, separated by nothing more than the pane of glass at the front of their television. Why? Because now we f***ing can." Buckle up, Buttercup, and prepare for a journey down T&E Software's nightmare universe. They're known best for games like Hydlide, Hydlide 2, and action RPG hit Pebble Beach Golf Links. It featured the legendary video game icon Craig Stadler.
It's a must to get the ball in the fairway, which usually can take a long iron or a 3-wood.
Which leads us to Virtual Hydlide's first and most glaring problem. They could have made him a playable character, but they didn't. He's not even an NPC.
Great par.
So to make up for this critical flaw, the Walrus himself will provide color commentary throughout this review.
Great play. You're playing much better.
Virtual Hydlide is a remake of the first Hydlide, bringing the player back to fairyland. A princess was kidnapped by an evil Dark Lord thing. Groundbreaking character development. Like many Saturn games of 1995, full motion video opens it up. But what makes Virtual Hydlide stand out is it did not leave full motion video at the start menu. The entire game is live action. There's some polygon elements in the environments, but everything else is a digitized sprite. It doesn't get more realistic than real itself. When you break this software down, there's actually a number of interesting things going for it. At each new game, the map randomizes itself, leaving a reference code in case you want to share your map. Its manual boasts 40 billion possible maps. The other big cojones is you can save anywhere. Very few video games could do this on 90s consoles. Only problem is it takes up about half your internal memory. There's no good way to explain the Virtual Hydlide experience with words alone. You need to live it. This is Jim. That's his name. No crazy fantasy European name like Gilroy Gunderson of Ironheart. He's just Jim. Jim knows how to sprint. It's his specialty and the best move in the whole game. Right away, you start with a few items plugged into your elaborate inventory. There's a maximum weight for equipped items and a separate max for what you can carry. You start with the fairy crest, which is proof that fairies exist. Okay? Let's try attacking some blobs with my toothpick. Oh! You get points for killing them. Not like experience points, I mean points, like an arcade game. I understand third-person RPGs are a slightly new thing, but this is weird. You quickly find out there's absolutely no reason to attack any of these bad guys unless you want points. You basically get no reward for killing them. They almost never block anything, and they follow you at a less than crawling pace. They're so slow, you can sprint away every time. There's a store where you can spend your points to get items, but all of the items in that store can be found in-game relatively easily. All enemies and most objects are forward-facing sprites. It looks like I should be able to wander around and complete dungeons at my leisure, but the compass and X marks the spot put you on a linear path instead. In Zelda Breath of the Wild, developers showed off how the horse can naturally run around trees without you needing to steer it, just like in real life. Jim operates the same way, putting Virtual Hydlide more than 20 years ahead of its time. Amazing. Simply amazing. Your first stop is the graveyard. It's a small square. Jim must make the arduous journey to the other side of the square. The hardest part of this dungeon is figuring out what button you press to interact with the big gravestone. It's the sprint button. When you complete a level, you level up. Kind of a literal interpretation of this concept, but okay. The overworld map wraps around, so when you go beyond the top of the map, you appear at the bottom. This overworld is a small planet. Jim's next stop is the Vampire Mansion. This is where the already awful frame rate really takes a dive. I calculated about 6 frames per second in certain areas. Some players say it's 5 or less at times. What makes this even more painful is the game requires exploration. I had to explore each room to find items I'll need later and grab 5 balls so I can get through the door at the top floor. It's sealed by mysterious power. The map doesn't tell you where anything is, and it's all randomized, so you can't look it up. This is also where I found out the hitbox detection is just awful. Not only are there 40 million possible maps, there are 40 million possible interpretations of his line. The Saturn can handle decent FMVs and good sound effects. This has been proven many times so far. So why couldn't they use a proper voice recording for one of the only chunks of dialogue in the entire game? You can't understand this. Like most things in life, there's a logical explanation. While editing, I messed around with the audio clip. This is what it sounds like when you play it backwards. I'm pretty sure Dracula's dialogue is someone saying something in Japanese, but put in reverse to make it sound spooky. Here it is, sped up. I'm not proficient in Japanese, but fortunately, people who are also caught this. According to Legends of Localization, this roughly translates to, please choose the number of players. In short, Dracula starts this battle by asking Jim to choose the number of players. Jim chooses 1. He occasionally disappears, but once you start slashing him, the hit stun prevents him from disappearing again unless you stop attacking. So he's easily defeated here. On the way to your next dungeon, you come across a sign with wisdom straight from a fortune cookie. Don't mistake recklessness for courage. So it's telling me, keep sprinting away from enemies. If I try to kill them with courage, I'm actually being reckless, going after points that don't really matter. Sure, I'll abide by your wisdom, Mr. Game. In the trial dungeon, you must use the lamp found in Dracula's house to see in the dark. It's a maze, but you have a map. Instead of a boss fight, the end of the trial dungeon has 2 chests, a shield, and you get Tool! It's the Spectacles of Truth. This further engraves the highly predictable fetch quest pattern. The Spectacles of Truth allow you to see the opening to the ruins, but the entrance is right next to the side. You also don't even need to have the Spectacles of Truth equipped in order to walk through the entrance. Again, no boss, and the maze has a map. It is at this point when I found out, Jim can turn faster if the map screen is open. Yes, that's a thing. Since this map also pauses the game, you're able to abuse this feature. You can turn through mazes faster and 180 away from enemies. At the end, you get a special item that allows you to not die from heat exhaustion in the next dungeon, the Volcanic Cave. Oh, I put in the wrong video. I'm sure you can see why I got the 2 confused. Now that I have a decent sword and shield, I decided to try fighting some bad dudes. Nope, just gonna bum rush again. It's been less than an hour, and I'm already halfway through the entire game. The boss fight is a 3-headed dragon, but since it's in a pool of lava, you can't confront it head on. You need some kind of range weapon. This is when another stark realization slowly ran through my veins. You must explore all corners of these large, tedious maze dungeons to find essential quest items. So that sucks. There's a scroll that detects where chests are, but it doesn't tell you what's in them. You still have to go and open them all. When you die, you are taken to a high score screen. Huh. Well, no room for PandaMonium, so perhaps a PSA instead. Then a continue screen. It looks like they couldn't let go of the arcade formula, even though it's an action RPG where you can save and load from anywhere. Pressing continue puts you back at the beginning of the level, but you can also save scum and load from where you left off. I couldn't find a bow and arrow or bombs or anything like that, so I decided to cheat and look it up. You're supposed to use the dark sword to launch dark balls.
Great shot, right down the middle.
There's a disadvantage to using dark balls. They drain points. Oh no! The necessity for these hard-to-find items is painful. Nothing in the game gives you any hints on what you need. You have to explore each corner of every dungeon to find what you need later. The gold you find gives you points. Do you ever have those dreams at night where you're running away from something, but for some reason, no matter how hard you try, you can't go faster than the speed of smell? If you don't know what that's like, play Virtual Hydlide to find out. The fight with the three-headed dragon is easy. Every time a head roars, it hurls exactly 2 fireballs. Each head has its own life bar, so killing it takes a while.
Drained it. Nice putting.
Fun fact! Virtual Hydlide has a speedrun community.
It's really important to be able to get at least 1 frame during the entire dungeon.
The next quest item you get is the Flute of Zaldis, which must be used to open the next dungeon. After playing, Jim puts his hands on his face, thinking, my god, what a waste of my youth. I'm thinking the same thing, Jim. This is probably making you wonder who recorded this incredible atmospheric music, so you can look them up on SoundCloud later. Charge through everything. Some chests are actually bad guys, but if you run around them, you don't have to fight them. This dungeon has multiple layers that are traversed through elevators or minecarts. The minecart has a 5 kilogram limit, but this doesn't mean you have to drop items. You just can't have more than 5 kilograms of stuff equipped. I had a tough time fighting this guy, so I went back online and discovered there were a few powerful items that I missed in the ruins. So I went back and found the fairy armor. Again, Jim puts his hands in his face and wonders what life would be like outside of hell. Since battles are almost never required, only 2 things factor into the true difficulty of Virtual Hydlide's game design. The first is figuring out what items you need in order to progress, with next to no hints. The second factor is endurance, being mentally able to grit through this tedious gameplay. I went back and tried fighting the boss again. This is when playing Virtual Hydlide became mentally taxing. I felt an energy being pulled from my body with every minute that I spent trying to beat this. Could this video game truly drain my being of all its energy?
Keep playing like that and you'll have a good chance.
Sound wisdom, Mr. the Walrus. So I called it quits. That's right, I stopped. This is Jim's personal hell, not mine. So I looked up how the rest of the game plays. There's a crystal maze, another fight that requires an item they don't tell you about, platforming, and then you use the 3 fairies you eventually find to get to the last level. You battle Dracula and the evil mage again before taking on Viralis. You kill him, the princess is saved, and then hell turns into stock JPEGs of a countryside. Apparently the fairy crest, used to prove fairies are real, has no purpose. In an opposite twist from our previous review, Shinobi Legions, the game developers are credited, but the actors are not. The public doesn't know who played Jim or the princess. It's laughable by today's standards, and even when compared to other 3D Saturn games from this year. So mid-90s reviews must have blasted Virtual Hydlide, right? Wrong. Game players gave it a 70%. One of its few criticisms is the 3D approach is somewhat awkward looking and distracting, saying it does many things well and some of the environments look great. GamePro gave it a 3 out of 5, saying it takes advantage of some next-gen elements to bring you into a new gaming world. In the UK, Mean Machines gave it a glowing review, calling it an ingenious game. Why did it get good review scores? 3D games are still a new concept in late 1995. Since this is one of the very first third-person RPGs ever, there's no set standard to compare it to. The departure from 2D is uncharted territory. Developers are still experimenting with what they can do now. You and I will play this and call it Ghetto Skyrim, but the people of 1995 have never seen anything like it before, so it's fascinating. This looked like a state-of-the-art video game. On the flip side, there were a few foreign reviewers who did give it bad scores. Next Generation seems to be the only US mag that saw past the
creamy 3D graphics
and gave it a 2 out of 5. They said, perhaps in the future, developers will stay away from the gimmicks and concentrate more on actual gaming substance. I personally think Virtual Hydlide is an objectively bad game, but I also respect it. It was ambitious, even though players would eventually see it as poorly executed. Randomized maps, real people for characters in a hyper-fantasy 3D world, and saving your game from anywhere, all packed into a single-disc console game. It's so awful that it's entertaining. Reddit user Sega Spurgers worded it best by saying it's so bad it almost transcends into good. It's art. T&E Soft seemed so preoccupied by whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. But Chairman Segata pays absolutely no regard to pure ambition and new tech. He only cares about how it stacks up. While our savior may pass the occasional chuckle at its poor execution, he knows it's not doing any justice for his dream of video game nirvana. When you start a new game, it generates a map code in case you want to play the same map. Now, I decided to try putting in random letters and symbols to see if that would work. It did. Virtually anything you can type within 10 characters can be used to generate a unique map. See, look at this. Welcome to Eat Ass Land, the haven for millennials. In about 1 week, the unexpected new rival to Sega's 5th-gen battle unleashes its creation to North America. Sony, a Japanese electronics company known for making televisions and portable CD players, decided to make a video game console, right when 3D started taking over the industry. Both consoles are already out in Japan, and Sony is already proving the PlayStation is easier to develop for, and its hardware caters to polygons. It has no first-party software, but more and more third parties keep signing up. Now, in 1994, Saturn did outsell the PlayStation in Japan. Throughout 1995, the PlayStation caught up, but didn't have a commanding lead. In North America, Sega rushed the Saturn to shelves in an attempt to beat Sony's launch by several months. This, despite only having 6 out of the roughly 20 planned launch games. Now that they're all out in the open, consumers are realizing most of its games are just okay, while less than a handful truly wowed the masses. With the promise of Sega Rally, Virtua Fighter 2, and Virtua Cop on the horizon, will Sega come out on top? Or will Sony's first console crush the king of the arcades?